I'm with Annette Grant and Sarah Karakaian, who need no introduction. They are vacation rental celebs, definitely. And they are, of course, from Thanks for Visiting. And they've been giving advice and tips to hosts for many years on their podcast. And basically, they enjoy spilling the secrets on everything you need to know to be a five-star host. So without further ado, Annette and Sarah, do you want to just introduce yourselves briefly?
Sure. I'm Annette Grant, and I'm one of the co-founders of Thanks for Visiting, and just been hosting since around 2016, and just noticed that there was a lack of information in the space about how to actually give a five-star stay and put hospitality first. And so I met up with Sarah, and I'll let her carry it away of us meeting and then us starting Thanks for Visiting.
Sure. I'm Sarah Karakaian. I've been hosting since 2012, and I moved from New York City to Columbus, Ohio to host more. I kind of saw all the red tape coming to New York City and how hard it was for me to expand my business there. So we truly left New York City for short-term rentals. That was the main driver. And we landed on Columbus, Ohio for all of its growth potential. But the minute I got here, truly the minute I got here, the government in Columbus was discussing regulations around short-term rentals. So I knew I had to speak up and I had to attend and make sure my voice was heard. Because as we all know as hosts, there are awesome hosts. Most of us are really great, but there are some bad apples. And I think that's why it can get a bad rap in a lot of communities. And so I wanted to let people know, if they were on the fence about short-term rentals, that there are hosts like me out there who really cared. So I showed up, and that's where I met Annette. And we went out for coffee, talked all things laundry and coffee and how to make guests happy, how to make unhappy guests happy again, like everything you could think of. And we really could not stop jabbering. And I don't think we've stopped since then. So that's kind of how it all began.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And welcome to both of you. So we're going to jump in to our topic today, which is talking about a more serious topic, burnout among vacation rental hosts and property managers and operators in the industry. So maybe we start with a definition, like what do you regard as burnout, or when can you tell that a host is approaching burnout or is burnt out?
First of all, I want to thank you for doing this topic, because there are many reasons why Annette and I started Thanks for Visiting, but this was a big one for me because I was burnt out at a time. And for me, I noticed it when responding to my team or responding to guests, I didn't have that same hospitable tone to my voice or that same solution-based mindset that I usually have. And that's when I knew, like, you are working too much. You are on too much. And so if you notice yourself getting there too, it's time to just stop and see how you can restructure everything that you've got, everything that you've built, so that you can get some time off.
And this is something that we say, it's one of our phrases, and it really, I think all hosts, operators, anyone will resonate with it in the vacation rental world. Is, parts of it can be part-time, but it's all the time. So, you are on 24/7, essentially, depending on your calendar, you really are on 24/7, 365. And a lot of times, like, to me, no news is good news. When a guest is reaching out, there's normally something that needs to be taken care of, there aren't a middle of the night call that can usually, like, okay, we'll see you tomorrow morning, it needs to be taken care of. So we just like to, a lot of people getting into this, we like to make them aware of, yes, there could be part-time, but it could be all the time. And so reminding them of that you need to be on all the time, and that, we in no way, shape, or form, I think one reason people hit burnout too is they hear a lot of, let's say their owner operates a lot of passive income in short-term rentals.
Yeah.
When you go into the mind with the mindset that it might be passive and it's extremely active, I think the burnout can come in much quicker because your mindset is just already in the wrong frame of mind when you come into short-term rental investing. So I think if if we educate that it's not passive, it's extremely active, if we can help educate right out of the gate, then it'll help some of that burnout too, because the expectations are kind of turned around and they can start hiring a team sooner than later. I think Sarah and I can both share that we knew a lot of us, it's we hire our team too late, because
Mm-hmm.
we do it better than everyone else. But I always like to say I was spinning plates for a really long time, and then they literally they crashed, and that was not fair to my guests. And so yeah, I think a lot of us reach it way too late, and then our guests do suffer. And unfortunately, we don't want that to happen, because then the whole industry suffers when that guest has that bad experience. So we've got to try to get ahead of the burnout. So like Sarah said, I'm glad that we're just talking about the topic, and we can share. We just had a call yesterday with our
Right.
mastermind, and people were being very vulnerable and using the word quit that I've never heard before, just because I think they have been in it for a while, and maybe the returns aren't there that they wanted to see, or they've been trying to do it all on their own. And so we're starting to see hosts kind of just being a little bit more transparent about their burnout also, and sharing it with us.
So you think it's kind of well, firstly, I mean, is it really widespread, would you say, in the industry? And also, do you think it's changing? Do you think you're seeing more of it because it's becoming more difficult, or do you think it's just a question of transparency, that people are more honest about it or talking about it more?
I think if you are in the short-term rental, vacation rental space, and you're working for a large team, you probably don't know what we're talking about, right? Because you walked into structure where there are proper schedules, right? It's 40 hours a week, at least in the States, that's like a work week, right? If
Sure.
you are in the world of co-hosting, right? Kind of the Airbnb coined term co-hosting, and or you're starting your property management business, you are the entrepreneur building it. Those people, I think, can really relate to this topic. And I think it's been there, I've been doing this since Airbnb really came on the scene. And at first it's very exciting. I will say that too. I think at first you're in that honeymoon phase. Like you are jazzed by getting a message from a guest, or those dings and dongs that your phone can give you, at first are exhilarating, right? Even if there's a problem for you, if you're a true entrepreneur, you love solving that problem. How can I solve this problem? How can I turn this guest around? It gives you life, it gives you energy. But I would say around, I don't know, the 1.5 mark, 2-year mark, there is that you're growing and you can't quite afford to bring on all the help you'd like, or all the tech you'd like, or you don't even know if you can afford it because your numbers, you haven't looked at them, you're not quite sure how to dissect them, and you're just in this place of, like Annette said, spinning plates. That's when I think it can backfire on you if you don't have a really solid either support system at home, outside of what you're doing, a support team, someone else that you're doing this with, if you have a co-founder. If you're truly on your own, it can get pretty dark pretty fast in terms of how you're feeling and how you can see a way out of it, because you are open 24/7, 365. You know what? I think there might be some hesitancy, because I think it's kind of so like Annette said yesterday, one of our mastermind members said, hey, when do you know when it's time to quit? And we were we had not heard that word quit. And we've been doing this for how long now? Since 2019. So I think it takes a lot of courage to say that you're thinking about quitting, to say that you are burnt out and you've had enough. And once you say it, it actually then it's just it's not hard to stop kind of venting, because it just feels so good to admit it. But I think you're probably right. I think it's a topic that it's very cool to talk about how successful you are, how many properties you're getting, how many doors you have, how much money you're making, but no one makes it a safe space to say that, hey, how do you handle being open 24/7, 365? How do you handle having to have your phone with you, phone side up at all times? Because like Annette said, it's part-time, but all the time, it's really hard when you think about it.
So Annette, I'd like to ask you, because you're saying that you experienced some of this yourself, right? And maybe tell us a bit more about that and how you kind of motivated yourself again, or how you coped with it.
I mean, I tell, this is a story I tell like time and time again. This is when I like didn't have any help. I was doing everything on my own, like all the cleaning, all the messaging, and I was laying on my couch relaxing, and like guest messaged me and was like, hey, like, we're here. We never got the check-in instructions. And I was like, I mean, you can only imagine like what happens at that point in time. And I looked and I was like, the reservation had come through. I just, this is like, again, this is like, I probably 2019. And I was like, what in the, or 2018, and I wasn't really using any tech. I was doing everything manually, just within the app. And sure enough, they had booked, and I missed it because I had multiple properties at that time. And like, this was a property, this was a time I was doing everything myself. So I wouldn't do the turnover immediately when the guest would leave. I would like give myself some breaks, and I hadn't cleaned that property yet. So I had to like pay for their dinner. You know, I was like, I was very upfront with them. It was, honesty was the best policy there. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I think and honestly, I could have gotten away with it then too, because this was several years ago, and they knew it was my property. I think they were giving me grace. But I do not think that would even fly at all. I don't know how anybody could get away with that, but I went over there, I cleaned it. I obviously paid for their dinner, all that, and was really like went above and beyond for them. But that was the day, like I hired someone that very next day to help me, because I do not ever want to feel this way again. Like, and so I know that sounds like that was my rock bottom moment. And I think what Sarah and I are talking about too is, I think the level of burnout is into the level of that you care. For instance, in our world, most of our community are owner operators. So they own, that is their asset. That everything in that home they own, from the couch to the washcloths to every wine glass. So there can be this different ownership when you actually own the property and everything in it. It becomes a lot more personal. And so I think that can heighten that levels of burnout also, because you know it's you own it, it's your asset, it's part of your portfolio. So I do think that kind of goes in line with potential scale of burnout too. And just to go back of why maybe people don't talk about it as much is, like, again, we own those properties. A lot of people are on social media with their properties. They're trying to get direct bookings. They're doing all the things in their community. And when you come out and say, I'm burnt out from like bringing people into my home, who wants to book with you? So, you know, everyone is also the owner of their business. So there can be an extreme impact of, like, when you're the leader, a lot of times, you know, all these people are the CEOs of their business. That's not something that's very open, you know, and you just know that it impacts your entire team, every single one of your guests. So I think that's why it is a lot more bottled up also.
So other than renting or you know, looking at a team and outsourcing and trying to get help, you know, what are the first kind of interventions or first steps that people should take? Like, what else would you recommend they do when they feel like this, or feel overwhelmed, stressed out, whatever we want to call it?
I want this response to come at a place of understanding that not everyone has the means to which they can be as careful with their calendar. There are some people, when you get a short-term rental, it's very important that you are open 24/7, 365, so that you can make the funds necessary to make sure that you're paying that asset and hopefully making a profit, right? Cash and having cash flow. And we are, of course, looking, you know, for those rental by owners and co-hosts, right? And property managers who are building their business. But the first thing that we say is, if you have that flexibility, to make sure you understand your calendar. Down to, like, for the holidays, you know, are you in a position where you can make that call that you're not going to allow check-ins and check-outs on major holidays, or major holidays in your life, right? Maybe they're not federal holidays, but they matter to you. You do have levers that you can pull within your operational calendar that you can control. And if it doesn't mean sacrificing revenue, I think making sure that you have a tight grasp on your calendar and your personal life is really important. We know hosts that do have some flexibility, and they might take a week off, just like normal businesses do. Put that sign on that front door and say, we are shut down right now, for holiday or whatever that is. So if that's one thing that you can do other than getting support, is to make sure that you understand your calendar and to give yourself some time to breathe if having additional team members isn't something that you can bring on.
So I'll second Sarah in with that calendar is knowing your numbers. I think you'll hear midterm rentals are really on the rise because people are trying to squeeze as much revenue out as possible. But if you know that your market is not there's no demand in your market during a certain time, maybe that is the time. What is that opportunity cost of just letting your team have a break, letting yourself have a break? And the more you know your numbers and that historical data too, that might really help you. Hey, like Sarah said, we know these 2 weeks our profit is barely booked. The profit's not going to be there. Let's do home maintenance projects, things where we can just let the home and ourselves breathe. And it doesn't, because obviously you're not completely closed because people can still book for all the other calendar dates, but having some of that time where you can get some of that work done. But yeah, that calendar control, I think is so helpful, and for your team, because then if your team knows they're not having to do a turnover on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, or again, whatever holiday is important to them. And I think that's something too, is asking your team ahead of time if there's anything important to them that you could also weave in to the calendaring. The day you open your door and you accept any money for an overnight stay, you are a business, and you start running as a business that day, even if it's part-time, on your personal property or your 365, you are a business owner. And yeah, you might not go in with an extreme business plan, but yeah, it's really, really important. But the other thing I want to say about how can they prep for it is, again, I think that's why Sarah and I got along so well. If we're honest about it, we had another person to talk the good, the bad, and the ugly with, So I think that having a community of hosts, another person that you can vent to, be honest with. And Sarah say it all the time, write a text to however you want to respond to that guest. You can let it out or text it to somebody else and then really respond. But I think having a person, I think that's why our community is so sticky, and there's so many people in it and they stay for a long time, is because they find the other hosts get them. They understand that lifestyle. And I think that's a key component of why people get burnt out, is they don't find those people. So that encouragement is to find a person or people that are in this lifestyle, that have the same highs and lows, and that you can be open with. I think that's where people, people try to tell maybe their spouse or their best friend that has nothing to do with the short-term rental, and it falls on deaf ear. They don't want to hear that. So finding someone that can actually understand your pain and your day-to-day, I think, is crucial to helping during that burnout.
So in terms of scaling, I mean, would you say kind of taking a decision about when or how fast or how many or whatever to scale has an impact here? And how do you manage that without, going towards burnout?
Here's what I've learned about scaling. There's always going to be the messy middle. I don't care how much you invest in courses or a coach or anything. There's going to be a messy middle. I think it can be less messy and you can be more supported. But just know that it's hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. Also, I do believe that 10xing your business is a lot easier than staying super small. You super small hosts out there, you're managing, let's say, sub 10, sub 5 properties. You are heroes because it's that point of being, having enough revenue to maybe have a cleaner do your cleans, but maybe you're doing everything else. And it can be a lot. And then when you do decide to grow, it's all about, like you said, planning for it. Okay. Understanding your numbers, projecting. We like to look back on our numbers and see some historicals, which is it tells you a lot about your business. But then you need to say, okay, if I bring on another 5 houses over the next, whatever it is, 6-8 months, that'll give me this much extra revenue. And if I bring on a person at this salary or at this hourly rate who can help me. How does that shake out? So do some planning around it. The more you plan, the more you can know what to expect when you do start adding those properties. And also, this actually was a conversation from this amazing Brave community member yesterday. She didn't really take into consideration when it comes to scaling, it's not as easy as just quote unquote adding a property, right? Like, even if the property already is furnished, how much goes into plugging it into your systems, right? Whether you're training your cleaners on it or making sure that they meet your brand standards or getting it plugged into all the technology you already have going. So to really think ahead as scaling all the work that goes involved in onboarding a property and onboarding a team member, it takes time, and it usually takes more time than you think it does.
Yeah, I imagine. Okay. And if we look at how to look after yourself, like self-care, like any so kind of daily or weekly self-care practices that you would recommend, or that maybe you do to try and let off steam, or keep stress low.
I'll let you take this one, Ned. This is your wheelhouse.
I think that is so individualized to what that person needs, but definitely think about it. And self-care doesn't have to be like, hour-long massages and completely unplug. Like, it can literally be your morning cup of coffee, where you do 5 minutes of just focusing. Most people, it can't be a big thing. Like, it can't be expensive and it can't take a lot of time. What's something you can do daily that you enjoy? Like I have an app on my phone that's like a mindfulness app, and I look at it when I drink my coffee. And that's like 5 minutes. And honestly, some days I miss that. So I think starting really small, and because if you try to have these grandiose like self-care, I don't know if go with what makes you feel good. Don't try to go with the trends of self-care, like what definitely one, like just something small that you can look forward to, for sure.
I love that response because there is so much, there can almost be burnout around self-care too. And
I agree
that because there's all these like things that you're supposed to do as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur or whatever. And it's like, you try to fit in all the things. You try to fit in running your business that's, by the way, open 24/7, 365. And then like Annette said, there's all these, you're supposed to like journal, and you're supposed to like take walks, and then you're supposed to drink tea and then hang upside down for, it's like, so it's very much like you do you, but just remember who you are and listen to yourself and your body and stay true to that.
And one more thing I really want to make sure that we get into this interview is back to the scaling, is I want everyone to know that there is most likely in any business I've ever been in, there is actually less money for quite some time when you're scaling. And I want to be very honest and open about that when you scale, there are a lot of investments that need to be made in your business and in your team. And a lot of times that means your personal revenue declines. And I want to be very open about that, because scaling does not always mean that you are going to be bringing in more money personally. So I just want to again, let people have that plan and share that a lot of times scaling does not increase the bottom line for quite some time. And if you're willing to go through that, absolutely do it. But just be aware that scaling doesn't automatically increase your bottom line. This is volume is vanity, profit is sanity. So I heard that years ago, and that is my quote for today. Volume is vanity, profit is sanity. So keep that.
I love it. Very good. Yeah, amazing quote. I'm thinking about guests, and we talked about expectations of guests and being on 24/7. How do you manage kind of difficult situations with guests and set boundaries with guests to, do you have any tips in that regard?
It's all about setting expectations, and it's also about meeting your guests where they're at. So you have to set the expectations wherever the guest is at. That is prior to booking. That is right after they book. That is the booking window from when they booked until when they arrive. That is via text, maybe an email, and also in something physical on property. I think sometimes hosts, especially if you're newer, you think, well, if I said it once or I post it one place in terms of like, hey, I'm available from 8 to 8 p.m. And then after that, emergencies only, and they put it in one place, maybe their house rules and their listing, or they put it in an email somewhere that the guest is going to remember those things. And you have to remember, for a lot of these guests, they're coming to unplug, they're coming to relax. And if they're reaching out, if they need to reach out, there's probably some sort of challenge they're facing within your property. And I find more often than not, I've been doing this for a very long time, there are some outlier guests who don't care about your boundaries, but let's put them aside. Most guests do. It really is about you, the business owner, meeting your guests where they're at, and making sure that you're very clear about your expectations about communication. And once you set those boundaries, I mean, down to like now, if a guest calls us after our business hours, they immediately get a text that reminds them, hey, you reach out to us outside of business hours. If this is an emergency, here's what to do. Whether it's like call 911, or if there's something that only like our team can take care of, we have some backups for our backups so the guests can help themselves. But again, it's like, and we have it posted in a million other places along their booking journey. But for me, that's been the best way to have some guest host balance.
Balance and control. Good. And what about tools? So your favorite tools to kind of manage burnout or manage stress, so to say. Manage your workload so that you don't end up in stress, shall we say.
I'm going to flip it quickly for a second. I actually think the technology can cause the burnout because so many hosts are wanting to layer on all of the technology and they really don't understand any of it. And that actually leads them to think they should be doing more, they should be doing better, they should be doing things faster. So I do think that there is a lot of technology out there, and making sure that you're bringing it on at the right time. And if you even need it, is really important, because that can lead to, a lot of adding on a lot of things financially that you don't need. And then adding on a learning curve of all of those things that just exasperates if you're already feeling a little stressed or burnt out, and you can kind of feel like, why don't I understand these tools? Why aren't they bringing me more bookings? Or why isn't it making my life easier? So I think that's one of those messy middle things too that Sarah was talking about. Understand that the tech doesn't automatically get installed and then everything's wonderful. There is always a learning curve with tech. And I think understanding that ahead of time, and that no tech solution is perfect, and like learning how to make it perfect for your world.
What's been most helpful in terms of technology in, initially in your journey? So what were the first tools you added, for example?
I would say automated messaging for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting that is probably, we would recommend to every host utilize every platform has that now. So any sort of automated messaging, and that goes back to what Sarah just talking about, that guest communication, that ensures that each guest is getting the same tone. To be honest, having a dynamic pricing tool, because what you need to make sure that your pricing is where it's at too. So those are two things automatically. And I'm going to let Sarah go on with some operations tools, but those are two baseline I think every host could use immediately business wise.
Mm-hmm.
As a host, especially if you're thinking about scaling, you have to have something that is your source of truth for your day-to-day operations. There's a lot of solutions out there, but like really think property care, property operations, for me, it's like my lifeblood. Like I love it because I can go in there and there's some automations that are already taking place, so I don't have to think. And it's kind of like dummy proof because it tells you like, here is what you're doing today. Here is what your day needs to accomplish. And when your brain is thinking marketing, pricing, new properties, all the things, it's like you kind of need the technology to remind you like, okay, but here's what needs to get done today. So some sort of property operations that helps you understand, and all your cleaners are involved in it, even if you're your own cleaner, maintenance, any sort of guest requests, whether it's early check-in, late checkout, some sort of amenity, one source of truth where all that lives and it is on some sort of automation is a must-have for hosts. I just want to thank you for doing this topic. And especially as content creators ourselves, I think maybe we could do a better job about talking about just how much goes into the operations of vacation rentals and short-term rentals. And if you're consuming this interview right now, to really pat yourself on the back, I think you're doing a great job. And just to prepare, look ahead, look back as much as you can, and take care of yourself.
Perfect.
And I think my words are like, it's not better there than it is here. So I think people thinking like, well, I'll go to this other career, I'll go to this other business, I'll start this other thing. I just like, it is like grass is always greener. Like it's not better there than it is here. It's about working within, what your constraints, learning to live with it and move on. Because I think every industry has some form of burnout.
No, thank you so much. That's brilliant. I really enjoyed that. And I think you've shared valuable advice for everyone. So thank you very much. And hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.